Hello and welcome to episode 225 of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Marco.
And I'm Tarek.
And thanks for joining us on the podcast where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. And we've got a huge back catalogue of brilliant guests there, authors, screenwriters, comedians, journalists, probably any other type of writer, video game writers, any others I've missed. Newspaper
comics?
writers.
You say
No,
comics?
Journalists. No, I didn't say comics. There
Comics.
you go. But there's a whole batch. There's 224 at least.
I mean, there's got to be at least one in there. Someone's
Exactly.
street.
So go and check that out. Now, last week, you weren't here for the intro, Tarek.
Sorry,
but
what?
We had Stuart McBride on, which
Yep.
wasn't a fun episode to edit because of technical difficulties, but he was a great guest. Big
I also
name
have to
in
say,
the
came up
crime
really
scene.
well, I thought, Marco. Very impressed.
Excellent.
I mean,
Excellent.
God only knows how difficult it was to edit, but final product was excellent.
I might post a picture of all the cuts that were required in that episode to make it all line up. But we did it, and it was a great chat with Stuart, who is
It was
obviously
great,
like a crime fiction giant, a Scottish crime fiction giant.
Yeah.
And we are staying with Scottish crime this week as well.
We are indeed this week. We're chatting with the wonderful Kate Foster, who has had 3 books published. Her newest is The Mourning Necklace, which is out 29th of May. So right about time of listening for a lot of people, pretty much, it'll be out. And she's had an interesting way in, journalist by trade to start with. Did the Curtis Brun creative writing course. We've had a few folk on who've done this course. It does seem like one of the better ones. You know, there's so many courses out there, but there's a few out there which kind of I do like the sound of personally, where they kind of you work on one project throughout the entire course.
Yeah.
And you hone your skills in that book. I quite like that. And she then went from there. She did the Bloody Scotland competition where you pitch your novel. But Marco,
Pitch
you did
Perfect.
this as well. Pitch. You did it last
Yes, I
year,
have
2
done
years
that.
ago.
A couple of years ago,
Yeah, and
I
you-
made the final. I didn't win it. So
But
it's
you
obviously a rubbish competition.
it was obviously fixed that you didn't pay enough money to Bob. But yeah, so it's a great competition. You pitch a synopsis of your book to a panel, including an agent and editors, and then the prize. Well, what is the prize you get from that? Is it basically just kind of recognition and?
I think there's now a financial prize as well, but yeah, I think mainly it's recognition. You're and also what the Bloody Scotland are very good at is that they get you some press as a result of that, and that
Yes,
obviously helps you
very
find
true. Yeah.
agents, get in front of agents, get in front of editors, and all of that sort of thing. And I think they've got a tremendous record of people, you know, not just the winners, but people in the sort of final of Pitch Perfect each year, going on and getting publishing deals. So
Yeah.
I
And
am
I-
still waiting for mine, strangely, but hopefully it's on its way.
I mean, we've talked before, and as you found yourself, that the benefit of going along to these things is not only to impress the panel who's watching, but it's people who are in the audience or watching at home. You know, there's
absolutely.
You never
There can-
know who's watching. What
Exactly,
agents
there
are.
can be
Could be
agents watch.
tabs.
There can be agents. You know, it's Bloody Scotland's a literary festival in Scotland. For those that don't know, in Stirling, in September every year, crime writing festival. But yeah, there's often agents there at the festival anyway, so they'll come along to this. So
Yeah,
you're
to
pitching
see what-
effectively to them as well. And as we
Exactly.
say to Kate in the episode, you know, any route that you as a writer can take to get yourself and your work in front of an agent
Yeah, 100%.
that is not just sending it in to a slush pile that is going to take months to look at
Yeah.
is worth doing if you
Yeah,
can do it.
totally
Now, some
agree.
of these are, you know, financially difficult to do for people, which isn't fair, of course, but you know, Pitch Perfect isn't that. It's a competition. You can just enter. It's pretty easy to enter. It's a short, I think, only 200-word pitch you need to do, if that.
Yeah. So very, very tight.
So yeah, I'm sure they'll be announcing the details of this year's competition soon. But yeah, highly worth doing. But
yeah.
we're sort of talking about the thing that we chat with Kate, amongst other things.
Yes,
So we will
let's
get-
save the meat.
Yes, it will get straight into the podcast after a quick advert for a writer's notebook. But before we do that, I will, as ever, just mention our Patreon. You can support the podcast, which helps us to continue to make the podcast. You can join for free, just to join the Discord, have chats on there with us and other listeners. some of whom are big name authors as well.
Big
But
name authors.
you can also support us financially. You get benefits for supporting at different tiers, including, free books, free notebooks, early access to episodes, bonus episodes, all that sort of stuff. So please do check out the Patreon if you haven't already. But as I say, let's get straight into the interview, and then we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just a story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
Did you always want to be a writer?
Yes, I did always want to be a writer, but I think that it kind of comes and goes, throughout life. I think definitely as a child I did, so I then became a journalist, and then I was a writer because I was a journalist, but I still kind of wanted to I had quite a lot of attempts at writing fiction, and life kind of gets in the way, so I only really came back to a really serious attempt at writing a novel-length piece of fiction when I was probably in my kind of early to mid 40s. That's when I really started to come to the novel, and I think at that point I was actually ready to write it.
Because you did a creative writing course, didn't you? Is that
I
was that something you did?
Yeah.
When you decided, I'm going to go back and give this a proper try.
I did write a novel, and which didn't get, which was rejected by probably about a dozen, agents, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided to do the creative writing course so that I could then, it was a commercial novel creative writing course with Curtis Brown, because I thought it would probably be really helpful in just getting me to understand what a novel actually is like, and there was a massive difference between what I was doing and then kind of a like a book that you can then put on a bookshelf in a bookshop and sell it.
What was that? Because I know they do online courses and they do in-person courses. What one did you do?
Well, it was online because they were all mostly based in London, and I'm in Edinburgh, so I wouldn't be able to do it. But as it happened, it actually started just as we went into the first lockdown.
Okay.
So it was quite well timed. Actually, it actually focused me when everything was going wrong.
So you say you tried to write one book before the Curtis Brown course, but prior to that one book that you'd submitted to agents. Was that your first book you tried to write, or had you attempted other books before? How many books did you try writing in total?
It was the first book I'd finished.
Okay.
I'd certainly had various stabs at writing. I don't think I'd got any more than a few thousand words, and I didn't really have a very good concept. I couldn't have said any of them in a sentence. So I had sort of, it was very kind of, I had the idea of it, wanting to do it, but I didn't really know what I was doing. So I was writing poetry, I was writing short stories, I was writing bits and pieces. And then I think the reason why I felt able to tackle a novel was because I was a journalist and I was writing quite short pieces for news and features. So I wanted to kind of break out of that mold at then. But yes, I mean, I'd certainly had a lot of different attempts at writing various things.
And when you did that, so you finished that book, you sent it out to agents, it didn't get anywhere, so you decided to do the writing course. I'm always interested in writing courses as to what you take out of them, because obviously you've already written a book, so you have the the drive and
stamina,
all of that sort of stuff. So what is it that you took out of that course that you think helped you?
I think it changed how I thought about what I was actually doing. So one of the I think there was a couple of really kind of key things that were said to me during some of the classes. And one of we had a kind of a session with an agent, because Curtis Brown is an agency, as well as a writing school. And one of the agents said something along the lines of, if we're going to take your book and we're going to represent you, then we've got to sell it in a bookshop for about £20 alongside big books like, Michelle Obama's memoir.
Yeah.
So that's how you've got to think about it. It's got to be that compelling. And that, I think, focused me quite a lot in terms of writing bits and pieces to please me, and then actually thinking about it as a project and as something which would actually give a lot of reading joy to the reader. When I say joy, it doesn't mean it has to be a joyful book, but it just means it has to kind of satisfy the urge in the reader to have this experience. So that was probably the biggest takeaway, and that's still in my head now.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you want to write that initial feeling for writing a book is that you want to tell a particular story, and you want to explore that and write a novel, and hopefully people like it and you can just get out there. But if you're wanting to be a published author, you do have to, we've had discussions about, do you write to market and all of that, but I think it's maybe not right to market, but you have to be aware of the commercial side of it if that is your goal as a writer, to end up on the bookshelf somewhere.
I didn't really think, I'm writing to market here, but it just made me kind of stop and think, whatever you write has got to be, it's fighting for space. So every word counts. The plot really matters, and it was that kind of thing. So rather than, and I did have ideas that they were kind of, I would quite like to do this, but actually I kind of focused on the idea of my first book, which was, I'd already started writing the Maiden at that point, but it really helped me kind of focus on what is this book, and what am I trying to say here. So that was helpful, and also I think there are a couple of techniques that I learned, which was basically, I think for a novel, I think it's really helpful if you can grab the reader quite quickly and try to get them. Some people say you've got to try and hook them by the end of the first chapter, but my mentor said try and get them within the first few sentences. And that is difficult. That's the hardest thing. You're sweating over it, but if you can get the sense of the entire book in the first few sentences, I think that was something which I wasn't quite getting either before.
I think that's a really good point in that kind of opening, that first paragraph or so of statement of intent almost is what the book's going to be about. And I think I remember chatting to someone, and they were saying, in their view, the first few lines, whatever, don't even have to be connected to the book or the whole story. It just needs to be something which is
Compelling.
like compelling, some
Yeah.
kind of hook which gets you, and even and then it's a jumping off point to bring you into it, and it doesn't have to be tied to the plot or the character. It just needs to be some kind of like, oh, that's an interesting. What does that mean? Or
Yeah.
something that gets you. Yeah, it's a key thing.
It's interesting as well because I think what the more people we've spoken to on this, and then also getting to know writers in, like, I'm a member of a Discord server that writers are on and stuff, and sometimes what you see is with people that are just starting out, when they're asked to submit a chapter for a competition or to an agent or something, they sometimes say, well, do you think I could submit my 8th chapter, because that's really exciting and stuff, and they and of course the answer to that is, well, you should, it should be the start. Why do you have to get to chapter 8 before it suddenly jump in? Yeah,
exactly.
It is, and not to put too much pressure on yourself as a writer, because actually sometimes you've not got the first chapter until you've done the whole draft of the first.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
that's
like
true.
and so sort of try and sort of block. I call it blocking, to sort of block something out. That's fine. That'll do. Move on. Move through the book, and then you can come back to it. And I certainly was probably. Well, I think all of mine have been substantially tweaked. The Maiden had my first book. I think that first chapter, it must have had 20 rewrites.
Yeah,
It was.
Right,
It must have had 20 rewrites.
but in some ways, it's such an important chapter, isn't it? That it's make it or break it, isn't it? If focus in a bookshop, looking at the first few pages, that's the point where you either get them or don't, I suppose, a lot of times.
Not just for the reader, but also for you, because it's like hanging your coat on a good coat hanger. If you've got that structure there, then everything should just fall from it nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you, as you said, lockdown happened when you were in your creative bound writing course, and I remember saying you were working on the Maiden during the course. That was part of the course kind of structure, was working on this book. Is that right?
Yeah, it wasn't called The Maiden then. It was roughly that. It was that story, but it had a different name. And I'd actually submitted I must have submitted the first chapter to get into the course. It was, you had to kind of be working on a project. They reviewed it, and then sometimes they would let people in, or sometimes they would say, come, or maybe you're not ready to sort of attack a whole novel yet. So I just went for the full novel course. I gave them what I thought was this marvelous 3,000 words of intro of what was the Maiden, and I got into the course, and then I thought, this must be wonderful, this thing, that must be really truly wonderful. And then it was totally, the red pens that went through that, because I worked with a mentor. The red pens, but actually she was just really good at saying, I think you can go back and have another go at this. Just have another go at it. And so it moved at that. And then of course I think probably I had about 3 or 4 chapters which were kind of workshopped, but the rest of it was me on my own, obviously. Taking the advice from a mentor, and obviously your kind of fellow writers, and then going off on your own. So you have to, and of course we'd maybe give them a chapter and everybody would have a different opinion about it. So you have to then think, well, what do I want to do with all of this? So it's not, so there's a couple of chapters in the Maiden which have been worked up, but then the rest of it, as I say, was just me kind of feverishly in lockdown on a sofa, just writing.
And did you feel that having had that kind of feedback and workshopping on those chapters, that kind of first 3-4 chapters, whatever, even though, as you say, the rest of the book was kind of you by yourself working on it, did that kind of like set you up? Did you kind of do those first 3 chapters and think, okay, it's kind of clicked in my head, I know now where I'm going with it, or it's given me an insight as to what I need to do next, and that kind of charged you going forward? Did that help set you up for where to take the rest of the book?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it did. So I was a little bit unusual in that I'd written half of it. So I'd written about 40,000 words by the time I submitted to an agent, which is actually quite unusual.
Okay.
But it's because I had then pitched the book at Bloody Scotland, and it won a pitching competition at Bloody Scotland called Pitch Perfect. So, and that was in lockdown as well. I had to do that on Zoom, which was just completely stressful. But that was amazing. So what happened then was I had a couple of agents who'd seen it, who'd seen me pitching, and somebody and my agent, who is my agent, who'd actually read a bit of it anyway. So I was taken on by an agent on the strength of half of it. So then I think what I then did was I wrote the rest of it, and I had an agent, and I then submitted the entire novel to my agent, and then she sort of said, I think there's more you can do here. So then there was another process of try again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's unusual for a debut in terms of the amount of work that goes into it. I was surprised at the time, and people were saying, my goodness, this is taking a lot of editing, which felt like I was being criticised because, I needed a lot of editing, but I did. I think by the time it came to sort of book 3, wasn't as much edited. So I sort of, you're kind of, yourself what you're doing, and you know what someone's going to say if you hand it to them.
Yeah. And the Pitch Perfect, I actually was in Pitch Perfect as well. And it's a useful competition, and it's a great, I often, especially these days when publishing is so difficult, anything that you can get in front of agents, that agents can see you, that you can try and sell your story to them directly, is invaluable, I think. And these sorts of competitions, I know they can be scary, and they can be a lot of pressure, but they are worth considering, I think, for people that aren't yet published, because otherwise you're just sitting in a slush pile of an agent. And we hear stories every day of how many submissions the agents get these days.
Yeah,
and
they do.
It's very, very difficult to break through that way, I think.
I think that actually, once you kind of push past this sort of theatre of a pitching contest, when it's everybody, goodness me, it was very supportive. It was very everybody wants you to do well. Agents aren't, and publishers, they aren't there to kind of have an argument with you. They're there because they actually want the next book.
I guess they're looking for stuff.
That. They really do. That's their job. They're looking for the next thing that they can publish. So they will be really pleased to hear a pitch. So that's not something I think anybody should be overly nervous about. I know it's daunting, and I was quite keyed up about it. But actually, it was good. And actually, I think it teaches you. I think you have to own your pitch. You have to know what your novel's about. And if you're and even just rehearsing a pitch I think it can give you a really good overview of what's working and what's not working.
I think
about
that's
your
right.
idea.
I mean, I often find that I can be stuck at a point in a story, and even talking it through with writer friends or whatever, the process of doing that, the process of me saying it to them, regardless of what input they then give back to me, helps me sort it through in my head, because you're having to look at it from a different angle, because you're trying to tell someone else about it, whereas when you're writing it, you're kind of focused on it. I suppose
It almost flags up what's not working. Like, what am I struggling to get across? There's something about speaking out loud or distilling it or summarizing it or something that really does show up the flaws or show you exactly where the issues are with something.
Exactly, because I've got my third book's about to come out, but I'm actually I'm writing book 4 just now, and I'm really I still couldn't give you the pitch on it. I think I'm nearly there, but I wouldn't even attempt. I wouldn't even attempt it, because I know that there's been it's just not quite there in my own head yet. So I'm still trying to work out problems with the plot and problems with the characters, and until I know exactly what it's about, then I wouldn't even. And actually, I've written a synopsis and everything, and I'm still not quite sure how I would say it in a sentence, but I know it's coming. It's a process of
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
sitting there. Helps you to be able to, it just comes to surface at some point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about it there. The Maiden, that was your first book that you put out in 2023, and it was a great hit. It won the debut prize at Bloody Scotland. It was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. You know, when it's set in Edinburgh, we said before we came on that we're all based in Edinburgh, the three of us. What was the draw for that book for you? Like, what was it? The setting, was that a big part of it that drew you to it, or was it the time period, that kind of historical drama? What was it about the Maiden that really drew you to wanting to write it?
So it's about the character. So it was really about the Maiden's is a historical thriller, and it tells the story of a woman who is she's condemned to death at Scotland's guillotine for the crime of murdering her lover, and so this actually happened in Edinburgh, in Christorfin, where I'm from, it was in the 17th century. And I grew up with this as part of our kind of local folklore. So the murder happened under a sycamore tree in the village. The sycamore tree was then said to be haunted by Christian Nimmo, who's the murderess. She was this kind of horrible figure. She was frightening, dangerous, quite a kind of wicked woman who was, she was having an affair with this guy. She then murdered him. It was everything was sort of horrible. And so when I was a child growing up in Christorfin, I was frightened of this spectre. And there's all sorts of rumours and folklore in Christorfin. For example, if you if you walked around the sycamore tree, then you would conjure the ghost. This sort of thing was going on. But actually, when I moved away from Christorfin, and I forgot about this for a number of years. I didn't even think about it. But then, when I was thinking about what would be a good story to tell, I was actually in Christorfin when I was thinking about this, and I was at my family home and just sort of having a think about various ideas, and I thought about Christian story as an adult, and I wondered if actually there was a backstory here. And in fact, she had murdered this guy because of a domestic dispute, because there had been, a difficult relationship. And the more I looked into it, the more it was clearly a case of all of these kind of like things were actually going on. And I thought it felt like a good feminist retelling. I thought, can you really do a feminist retelling of Christorfin? It was like, I was like, doubt. I was so full of my own doubt. But I thought, oh gosh, goodness me. But then I just did it. I thought, oh, that's actually would be quite interesting. And then just as soon as I started doing it, I thought, oh, this completely works for me. I brought in other characters. I invented some characters because I thought you can't just set the whole thing there. You got to bring in Edinburgh. You've got to bring in the closes and the kind of because it was just coming out of the plague at that time. It was such an interesting place. So I brought in another character who was fictional, and I suppose what drew me to it was the women, it was the characters, it was these kind of people who I would have been just human, just normal women like me, but just living in this completely different time. So that was what it was for me, and I still kind of and the characters of the Maiden really live with me. Like I really kind of feel them the most out of all of them, although maybe not. Maybe there's one or two characters in the other books, but I think it's because I have that personal kind of childhood connection with Christian.
And when you write historical fiction, how much time do you obviously, with that one in particular, you had the character and that's what sort of spurred the story on. But how much time do you spend researching before you actually sort of put pen to paper or finger to keyboard and start writing it?
I just think like a lot. But I think the best thing to do is to sort of just write and research at the same time, because if you have a research day, it can be. I mean, I actually had a research day today, but I didn't set out to have a research day. I just hit a brick wall and I thought, I don't know what I'm doing here, so we're going to have to go back into things. it's kind of like the way I do it is if I've got a scene, somebody's doing this and somebody's doing that, you need to kind of know what the room looks like. You need to kind of know what they're wearing. You need to know visually what's going on. So I suppose I'm researching as I go.
Do you get because the stuff that I write is historical as well, and sometimes you do. I know exactly what you mean with that, but sometimes certainly I can be like, oh wait, what would they be wearing, or something like that comes into your head.
Yeah.
And there's a temptation to go off and research that a lot.
Oh,
but
no.
or do you just like say, right, I'm just going to write through that. I'll know that I'll need to come back to this and double check that this can happen in the way that I'm writing it.
Yeah.
And just push through with the story.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you've got to do that. If you're like, say for example, if I was trying to hit a word deadline, I would probably be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Not always trying to hit a word deadline, and so I can spend more time on it. But also bear in mind that you don't need to, just because I know all of this, I know what they were wearing and stuff. Does the reader need to know? So that's does the reader need to know? So the reader does need to know some of it, but they're quite good. Readers are really good at sort of imagining, so you don't have to give them everything. You don't have to give them every single detail, because that would just be too much. It only matters if it matters to the characters. So that would be a general guide.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask about your kind of view on the authenticity versus accuracy argument or whatever. That is it more important that a book is slavishly accurate to the time, or just that it feels that it's authentic? And I know you kind of approach to dialogue, for instance, is to make your characters sound quite modern and kind of speak and kind of like people do now. And I wondered, is that a conscious choice to kind of just give things the flavour or the feeling that it's real, but not slavishly be devoted to exactly how they would speak or exactly who was alive at X point in time, etc.
I take quite a lot of liberties with it, because I think that I think there's a risk that it can get a bit boring. If you're quite slavish to it. I just kind of follow my instinct on it. I think some of my dialogue is quite of the time. I think it's of the time. I don't know. I wasn't there, but some of it is. I suppose some of it feels a bit modern. So I read letters and I read journals, and I really do study how people spoke. Particularly when I think it's my second book, The King's Witches. I was one of the characters, and that is King James the Sixth. So I really wanted to know how he would speak and how people would speak to him, and so that's all as authentic as I can make it. But in terms of like plot, character, I think the one thing I really am quite faithful on is setting.
Okay.
And I really try and make that as accurate as I can, and the rest of it, I think I do tend to kind of try and make it more so that our modern reader can connect as much as possible with somebody who's been dead for 300 years.
Yeah.
And your latest book is The Mourning Necklace, out at the end of May. Do you want to give us the pitch for that one?
So it's
sorry.
It's so all of my books are kind of based on real people and real events so far, which have happened in Scotland. And The Mourning Necklace was inspired by the story of an Edinburgh woman called Maggie Dixon, and she survived her own execution in 18th century Edinburgh. So she was hanged for the crime of it was basically child murder that she was accused of and hanged for, and there is doubt over whether that was obviously over whether she really did that or not. However, she actually the story goes that she was hanged in the Grass Market. as criminals were. And then there was a great big, kerfuffle at the scaffold, and the anatomists of Edinburgh wanted the body, of course, because they were into all the dissection. But her family got the body, and they actually managed to get it as far as they were taking it back to Musselburgh. She was a fishwife. They were taking it back to Musselburgh to bury it, and they got as far as the Sheephead Inn, which is actually in Duddingston, and they had a wake for her, or they stopped for it for refreshment, and of course the coffin was on the cart outside, and was there not just a big knock at the door, and in walks Maggie Dixon, and she had survived this event. Wow. And of course it was and it was just the most, could you imagine it was, but actually people did sometimes revive because the hangmen were not quite, it was all a bit, it wasn't the science very scientific. It wasn't, and there was all sorts of, I think it was the body going over the cobbles, or there's all these reasons why. So she's like my other characters in the sense of there's a pub named after her in Edinburgh. She's a folklorish figure. She's larger than life. She's a character. She's and actually I think there has been a kind of we don't really know who she really was, and we don't really understand her story. When I looked at her story, it was just a woman who was accused of basically leaving a child, to die in the elements, and then she protested her innocence, and that wasn't believed. I did wonder about whether what would happen if you had this hanging mark on your neck, and whether you would be scarred by it. And I saw her as kind of almost branded by it. And I wondered then if people would go around and would they try and touch her? Would they try and touch it? Did they think she'd, had she crossed to the other side? What did she know about the afterlife that they didn't know? So for me, it was a story of before and after. It was a story of kind of redemption. And of course, are they going to try and hang her again? But ultimately, I think as we go through the story, for me, it was a story about grief and loss. And it was really just looking at how the fact that she had lost this child, and how she kind of manages to kind of live her life after that.
Yeah, I mean, cool. I was going to say, Maggie Dixon's. I've had many a drink in there over the years, but I didn't know the story in the Grassmarket.
Oh, it's the Grassmarket. Yeah. That makes sense.
But when you're thinking of new novels and what you want to write and stuff, obviously Edinburgh has got this rich history. I mean, is it easy for you to find the story that you're wanting to tell? Do you have a lot of ideas floating about, and how do you decide what one to focus on?
I did. So I found it difficult. So I've written 3 books which are sort of based in Edinburgh, about Edinburgh women, and I think that's probably enough. I can't go through all of them, and nobody really wants me to. So I found Christian Emma's story. I found that just kind of came to me. My second book's based around the women who were the North Berwick witch trials, and that again to me was quite an easy one to kind of like look at, because I had a view in my mind about how I wanted to write that and what I wanted to say. Maggie Dixon, I came backwards and forwards on a few times, because I, like you, I know about the pub, but I thought, oh gosh, it's just a pub. It's just a woman's name on a pub door. I didn't actually know her story, and I actually kind of looked at it a couple of times, and when I actually sat down and seriously thought about it, I thought, how has nobody done a novel about this? This is This is astonishing. And so I was really careful about being, trying to be really faithful to fact on that. I had to kind of look at some of the elements and change them around a bit. But essentially, I think I have followed what we know of her life story, and so on. Although I've included a few other elements which I thought were may have been happening around her as well.
Yeah.
So that to me, that's probably enough, I think, in terms of Edinburgh, huge Edinburgh kind of events, and giving them that a new kind of focus.
Yeah. And you've said that the biggest, or one of the biggest pieces of advice that you got was, I think you kind of phrased it, not to invent a historical character, but just to make the real ones feel modern. So I suppose is that your way of saying don't, I guess, work with what's there rather than inventing stuff to fit the narrative or the story that you're trying to tell?
Yeah, so I would say that I don't make my characters historical characters. I try and make them modern characters because my readers are modern people. So that is a helpful guide as to what your characters should be like for me. So they're not... I don't think there's a huge difference really in people from the past and us. I think the only difference is the kind of the structures and the rules that we all kind of live around, and there are huge kind of parallels. So I'm just creating somebody. I mean, I've got to. I suppose I can speak about it now because I'm writing book 4 and I'm right at the bottom of the ladder on it. A character has to. They just have to have a bit of grit about them, and so they can be, from any time period, but they've got to make me interested enough to write about them for 90,000 words, and the reader doesn't have to like them. I don't have to like them, but I've got to be interested in them. So, I think modern traits are useful in that sense, because I might lose interest if I thought they were sort of archaic.
And would you want to, are you always going to want to write historical, do you think, or would you want to write something set in the present day?
No, I want to write something set in the present day. But I'm not quite there yet in terms of my. I do have a book in my head, and it's taken me quite a long time but I can sort of say in a sentence now. But I haven't really sat and written it because, you see, I don't know how I would feel about writing a book when there's emails and text messages, and I'm not used to it, and I don't know what my voice is. So I would really want to do that. I would really like to do that, but now is not the time because I've got to really concentrate on kind of making. I think my books need to kind of make sense, but I don't really want to jump around all over the place. So I want to. So they're all historical novels at the moment.
Yeah. And then they all, I suppose, would you all call them crime novels as well? They're still in that kind of same genre, thriller, pacey.
Yeah.
Novels.
Yes, we're certainly keeping in the crime genre, because I think the Maiden was, and I think that the Mourning Necklace, I mean, definitely is. It's got procedural and everything in it.
Yeah.
And book 4 is definitely got a strong crime. It's got a huge crime element in it as well. So
yeah, that's the kind of, crime is such a wide genre, isn't it? I mean, there's so many different parts of the crime world that you could it can be historical sci-fi, it can be procedural, just vaguely tangentially connected. So I feel crime is such a really good barrier. Jesus, what is wrong with my brain? Crime's a really good
framework.
What is the word? Frame, umbrella, whatever. You
know
get what I'm talking
shape,
about.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I think it's a nice sandbox of playing, isn't it? Because you can write so many different types of genres under that kind of crime umbrella.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have put The Maiden as a crime novel, because to me it's a historical
Would you not
novel.
have? Okay.
Well, I wouldn't have, but actually it has a crime in it. I suppose that was about my understanding of what a crime novel is before I started writing books. And I thought crime was, gritty kind of tart noir type books.
Yeah, no.
I think that I think that crime is much broader, and you can have domestic there, mystery. But for me, I think crime I think there has to be an urgency about it. Something's sort of gone wrong or is about to go wrong, and it's about your characters and whether you're trusting them or not as well. I quite like that about it.
Did you have any kind of conversations with your publishers about where they saw your books kind of sitting in the market? Like, did they come to you and say, "Oh, we see this as a kind of as a crime novel, as opposed to historical, or comparable books that they would want to put on the shelf next to?" Was there ever any kind of conversations about the marketing approach?
No, I think that's exactly what it is. It was marketed as crime historical, but reading group as well, which is that other kind of third bit of it, which is that. So it really, regardless of the crime and regardless of the of the time period, it's that kind of there's a sort of intersection between commercial and literary, which is I think called reading group fiction, which is just enough to kind of have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
To get book club type.
But
so people would maybe go, "Oh, that reminds me of such and such," or that raises that raises a question about modern times. So it's that sort of a thing. So that I think is where it's and so the writing of that. So to write that kind of book, you just have to not be overly commercial, but not be overly wordy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always that. But I often think as the author, you shouldn't have to think too hard about the genre or whatever that is. That's the job of the publicist, essentially.
Yes, I agree.
To categorize it.
Yeah. You got to write your book that you
write your
want
book.
to write.
But obviously, as we said earlier, have a commercial eye on it.
Yeah.
But the actual genre that is put into is a publishing creation.
It always makes me laugh. It's for films. I find it funny when it comes to the Oscars and the categories that they put them into the Oscars. Like you get The Martian going into the musical category, because something that makes no sense to me sometimes, or how they decide who's in a main actor and who's a supporting actor. And it's all to do with what else is in that category this year. It feels so artificial about how they place things and shelves and stuff, doesn't it?
But I think that obviously colleagues so agents and editors, that's just what they're really good at. So they can look at a pitch and they can go, "Oh, that's such and such meets such and such."
Yeah, I know how I would sell this. I know
so good at, and they're so good at that you don't really have to. I like to have an idea of it, but my ideas wouldn't be as good as theirs or as up to date. Everybody's usually talking about a book. That there's a kind of book of the moment, so they'll say, "Oh, it was a bit like this or it's a bit like that," and they're quite. But you can often cross. You can say, "Oh, it's." I think if you're trying to get comp titles for your own work, you don't have to comp them with books. You can comp them with films or TV shows.
Yeah, for sure.
It's completely fine to do
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, definitely. So you're working on Mourning Necklace is out at the end of the month as we record this, and working on book 4. Do you have any thoughts beyond that at the moment, or is it just the sole focus on book 4 at the moment?
Yeah. So I need to finish it, and that'll be good. I can't see past it. I actually can't see past it because it's a big thing. And when I've got a big book, I'm trying to write a book, I don't usually see past it. I think when I see what that looks like, then I'll know what the next one will be after that. I think you seem to follow almost a kind of a logical pathway. I think what I'm doing actually is I'm moving out of Scotland a little bit. So everything's based in Scotland at the moment, but I'm sort of straddling a little bit of Scotland and other places.
Right. Okay.
Just because I think that there's I'm really fascinated by other countries and particularly becoming interested in the historical and kind of cultural stories of other countries. So that's where I'm looking at just sort of broadening out the geography a bit, but probably still with the same flavour of the kind of things that I do.
What was the last book that you read?
Oh, the last book that I read was called The Show Woman by my friend Emma Cowing. She's a debut author, and it's the story of Scotland's first all-woman circus, and it's based on the story of her great aunt Violet.
Oh, cool. That's cool. Yeah.
And it's amazing, and it's out now.
Nice. What about the last film that you watched?
Oh, what did I watch? I watched I watched Conclave.
Oh, is it good?
okay.
I've not
Seen,
seen it.
yeah,
Not the
yeah,
Very,
no,
very apt.
it's, yeah, it's very good. I recommend it.
Yeah, I read the book a few years ago and very much
Did
enjoyed it.
ya?
So I do want to watch
Yeah.
the film. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And what about TV? What TV show are you watching at the moment?
Do you know what I've just finished and I binged it? It's called Four Seasons on
Oh,
Netflix.
yeah, the Tina Fey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, okay.
yeah. I've heard
Yeah.
good things about that one.
I actually found it so I thought that was really good, and I've just started. I watched The Handmaid's Tale the first episode of the last season of The Handmaid's
Yeah,
Tale.
yeah.
Obviously, that's the sort of thing I would watch.
Yeah, we watched the first season of Handmaid's Tale when it came out, and I enjoyed it, but it
Yeah.
was so depressing. It was so
It's so
grim.
depressing.
And I was like, I'm not sure I can. It was kind of like Black Mirror, like I'm not sure if I can watch a lot of these
Yeah,
back
we
to
were-
back. Yeah.
We were talking about this the other day, Tarek, that there are some shows that are good, but
Yes.
they're relentlessly depressing. There is
Yeah,
no,
I've
there's
never
no light
been able
in
to
them,
go back
and
to
you're
it, yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of like, you have to, I bail out of them sometimes. I'm just like, I can't
I'm
do
like
this
that. And
anymore.
there's films which are like I've never seen Schindler's List, and I know it's a classic. And I know one day I should watch it, but every time I'm ever like, oh, I've got a by myself in an evening. I should watch it. I'm always like, oh, I just can't. I can't face it. I'm not.
Yeah.
I want something uplifting or whatever.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I think the last season is supposed to be kind of like the kind of completion of the story. So that's gonna. It's what I think it's worth doing. I mean, I absolutely love The Handmaid's Tale. So, but I know exactly what you mean.
And the very, very last thing we always do is a super quick fire either or with no right answer, apart from the last
Okay.
one. But let's begin with reading historical books or reading modern day books.
Oh well, historical
Cool.
books.
Nice.
TV or cinema?
Oh, TV, because I'm just so lazy.
Night owl or early bird?
Early bird.
Music or no music when you're writing?
No music.
And last one, paper book or ebook?
Oh, paper book.
Oh,
Oh,
nobody
really?
ever picks ebook. No, nobody ever picks
Yeah,
ebook.
Tarek
No,
wants
I'm
people to
going to
pick
say
ebook.
Feel-
I'm
feel
going to
so-
say ebook because actually,
Yes.
Don't feel
Yes.
sorry
No,
for
no.
him.
Yes.
It's
The underdog.
easier-
We're back.
No, but actually, it's much easier to read an ebook.
It is. Yes. Especially when you're going on holiday somewhere, you got your Kindle or Kobo, whatever, just full of
It's much
Yes.
easier to do it.
highlights. Yeah, it's great. Good. Because we've said to so many folk in the past talk about smelling paper. And
The smell
all
of
that kind
paper books
crap's
is good,
weird.
Tarek.
It's a creepy thing to do.
You're
When
the
you smell
one
books,
that's
it's
weird as you.
I
the smell of an ebook.
I can't have that conversation without everybody just feeling a little bit uncomfortable in the room. So everybody's sort of picking up their books and it's just a very uncomfortable thing to do. So I mean, yeah, I know, yeah.
In the privacy of your own home.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do is totally fine.
So, first ebook winner, although sort of you forced her into the sympathy vote for the ebook.
It's
there.
still,
She did
it's still
say
a win.
paper
Still
book
counts.
first.
Still counts. I believe that's 1 for ebooks and 224.
It is about that.
Feels like
It's
that anyway.
about-
Psychologically, it feels like that.
Yeah, but also, Maggie Dixon's pub. As I said, I've had many a drink in Maggie Dixon's over the years, so I knew Maggie Dixon was a real person, but I hadn't really put much thought into it, I have to say. So
Yeah,
interesting
no,
that the Mourning Necklace is focused around her, which sounds like an interesting story.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Always with these things, with historical novels especially, how much of that history you put into the book and how much you tell the story that you want to tell. It's always an interesting balance that the different guests that we have on take with that.
Yeah, and certainly I really do like her approach, especially with dialogue, for instance. Making them sound modern. I think she talked about like her friends and family as a kind of comparison. Making them sound like people who talk today, as opposed to always sticking slavishly to the vernacular of the time. And I think that is almost a psychological barrier sometimes to historical fiction if it's if it reads like something which was written of its time, I can see that putting people off. Whereas if you make it feel fresh and modern and fast paced, etc., that's
it's a balance. It's the balance that you want it still to feel of its time.
You do. You don't feel like a.
You don't want it written in the manner of something that people would.
Although I have to
say,
it's funny though, because I mean, we've talked to quite a few historical authors now who about this topic of authenticity versus accuracy, and I have to say, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head who's got chosen to want to go down like the Hilary Mantel route of super accuracy, like, you know, keeping things.
Well, I remember we spoke to D.V. Bishop, and he was very. I think he was very precise about the dates. And
was
stuff
he?
Like
okay.
That. But then, you know, in other ways, you know, you read his books and they're not. They are told with the pace, I would say, of a more modern.
They do feel like modern thrillers still, but yeah.
It's and even Simon Scarrow, he was, you know, his Roman soldiers speak like, you know, low rank army officers.
Yes, that's right. Like modern day. Yeah, exactly.
Even though he's very much like, well, I don't want, you know, he doesn't want to change the way that someone died if there's a record of how they died and all that. So
maybe dialogue's a nice kind of midway point, isn't it? I suppose you can modernize that, but keep the rest of it, and it's kind of you please everybody almost. Maybe.
Well, thanks very much to Kate for coming on. And the Mourning Necklace, as we say, is just out. We'll put a link in the podcast description so you can pick that one up. But next week, we have another great guest.
We do indeed. Next week, we're chatting with the wonderful Callie Taylor, a.k.a. C.L. Taylor. Her latest novel, It's Always the Husband. A bit sexist title, if you ask me, but that's out, which is out very shortly. She is a really, really fun chat we have with her. It's a good laugh, and she's had a good, interesting journey in, like so many others have, you know, starting off with kind of YA novel type stuff, starting off with, not YA novels necessarily, but like Christmassy novels, you know, seasonal rom-com, I suppose you would call it if it was a film, I guess. And then very much a complete kind of pivot into much darker crime stuff. And that's when she's really taken off, and obviously stuff she's really enjoyed writing.
Callie was put away in CL.
Callie, yeah, that's right. Callie was murdered by CL. And CL came out on top.
It's a good chat. It's a good fun guest. So yeah, please do tune in for that one if you haven't already. I'll mention again, as I did at the start, we do have our Patreon, which helps support the podcast. So please do check that out if you haven't already. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do take the time to rate and review us on your favourite podcast apps, and you know, tell other people about us. Because the more listeners we have, the better guests we can get on here. So please spread the word.
So basically, if you're not enjoying the podcast, it's your own fault because you've not told your pals.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, what do you expect?
It's self-fulfilling.
And if you do want to get in touch with us, you can always find us through the usual methods. Send us an email, which is podcast@rightgear.co.uk. Go on to Twitter. Don't go on Twitter. It's a cesspool of hate and suffering.
Twitter because we won't see it.
Go on to Blue Sky. Go on to YouTube. Search for UK Page One. Find us. Leave us a comment, a tweet, a post, whatever. We're always there to
many
chat.
ways to get in touch with us.
Join our Patreon. Come to Discord. Chat with us there.
Yeah. Absolutely. But otherwise, have a great week, and we will speak to you next episode.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening, and join us for the next episode.
See you later.